Good morning. I am John Miller, founding attorney with Rock Solid Law, now celebrating our 30th year. So welcome. Congrats for spending a few minutes with us. We try to keep this to about 30 minutes. Happy Valentine's Week. Good time to talk about love, right? So the title of today's program is Showing Your Love to Those You Treasure. For those of you that are new, there is a chat bar right about there, and feel free to ask a question at any point in time on the chat bar, and I'll be glad to answer it either at that time or at the end of the session. No question's a bad question. We ask everyone who participates here to be in a cone of silence. So Rock Solid Law, 3 areas of law we do. Today we're going to be talking about estate planning. We also take care of business entities and organizations, small business owners primarily, and I close real estate transactions. So I'm an expert in those 3 areas. Why do I do that? Because home ownership is the cornerstone of the American dream. The heartbeat of the American economy is small business. And of course, I believe in the American family as essential to our culture. And estate planning is really about keeping American families together. If I can accomplish that throughout my practice, we're celebrating 30 years this year. I'd like to add another 10, 12 to it before I have another lawyer carry the mission of Rock Solid Law forward. That will be a successful career for me. So what is estate planning? Just quickly, it's not about the dull stuff. It's not really about the actual documents themselves. The planning, the advising is the part that really matters, the considering all of the strategies that are available to you to take care of yourself, your loved ones, your family in the long run. So it's really what I consider to be about is celebrating your legacy. You see my children over my shoulder, and that's who my plan is written to take care of. We think that preparing an estate plan is writing a story, writing the ultimate chapters of your life, and the title of today's presentation, Showing Your Love for Those You Treasure. So people talk about estate planning like it's about death, or about a will, or about a trust, or about a living will, or any number of other documents. It's not. It's really not. Those are the tools that we use. That would be like saying building a fantastic custom home is about the hammer, right? Those are the tools we use to get there. We want to emphasize in writing that story of your life what your goals and your family's goals and values are. I'm in a little bit of a storytelling mood this morning, so I'm going to tell 2 or 3 stories. I'll try to do the short versions because we try to keep these sessions bite-sized. But the first goal, just as a physician's first goal, is to do no harm. Our first goal in estate planning is to not burn down the family tree or allow a scenario where that could happen someday in the future. So I had a client some years ago, brilliant man. He immigrated, happens to be from Europe, to this country and served in World War II on the Veterans Bill. He received quite an amazing education, ending in a graduate degree in physics from Harvard. He had a fantastic career. I met him late in it through some real estate, and then he asked me to help him with some estate planning. Stan went through life. He's the typical quirky scientist, and he remained single throughout his life. And so the love of his life were 2 nieces, and one in particular had a son that was just the shining object of his later years. Specifically, he wanted to pass on a coin collection. He was a coin collector of really cool and valuable coins, and he wanted those to go to that nephew, great nephew, and he had started giving them to him, starting with the pennies and then the nickels. Sometime after I had done the real estate services for him, he calls me up. He says, "Mr. Miller," he always called me Mr. Miller. He was a very formal gentleman. He says, I need to do some estate planning. I'm not ready to do a will or a trust yet, but I want the other documents, the power of attorney and the healthcare surrogate and the living will that'll take care of me myself. I said, okay, that's great. but really doing the ancillary documents, as we call them, without doing the will is not a complete plan. And he said, I don't care. And I advised him, and he made his choice that he did not want those documents. So we did the other documents. We did not do a will. We did not do a trust. And he says, I'm going to be back in 3 years to do the other work. And I said, okay, that's fine. And it was fine. You know, that's his choice. The client's in charge. You get to choose what you want, and we will prepare for you what you want. But I got a call 6 months later, and he says, Mr. Miller, my message said, I'm dying and I ain't got no will. Now, Stan, which is a fake name, by the way, didn't talk like that. He was a Harvard educated physicist, right? So he was having a little gallows humor there. I'm dying and I ain't got no will. And of course, I called him back immediately. I said, what do we need to do? He said, I got to get a will together because, you see, Stan had these 2 nieces, and they were straight out of central casting from The Wizard of Oz, the good witch and the bad witch. And of course, the good witch had the great nephew, right? So he's wanting everything to go. He's finally decided after all these years to cut the bad witch out, which was a hard decision for him because it's all the family he had left after his sister died. So he says, I want to make sure everything goes to the good niece, and therefore goes to her one son, my only great nephew. And he was very excited about getting that done. And of course, he had a very short period of time within which to get it done. And he says to me, can you get that together for me? I said, yes, sir. And he arranged immediate payment, of course. And we went to work, and we got that will done. And I called him back the next morning. And I said, can you come in and sign this? I'm ready. He goes, you know, I'm not feeling so good. Let's try this afternoon. So we spoke again in the afternoon. He says, you know what? They're taking me over to hospice over by the Mayo. And I said, all right. He says, I don't want to do it today. Let's do it tomorrow morning. So I said, okay. And I got up the next morning early, and I dressed, and rather than going to my office, I took his will straight to the hospice next to the Mayo. And don't you know that by the time I got there, they had administered some very serious pain medications, and he went into a coma, and he never came out. And so for the 5 years after that, the niece that he was trying to disinherit litigated with her sister over everything. And ultimately, the sister had to buy the coin collection from her sister so that it would go to her son where he had intended it to. It could have been resolved so easily. And that timing has haunted me ever since, because I tried to get him to do it and he didn't want to do it. And 6 months later, he wanted to do it, and we couldn't get it done for him in time. So number one, let's don't burn down the family tree, because those sisters, they're never going to talk again. And the relationship between that great nephew and his aunt, it's gone. The aunt chose that. She didn't want that. But I know my client wouldn't have wanted that ultimately, even though he was going to disinherit her. So estate planning is about how you protect your children and your grandchildren, in addition to yourself. I say yourself. During your lifetime, these documents, like a healthcare surrogate, a power of attorney, they're going to come into play, the HIPAA release, to make sure that whatever happens to you, somebody's there to step in. I've got another story I'm not going to tell today about Groucho Marx. You can ask me sometime if you like. And Groucho actually had to go through a living probate. That's a guardianship procedure where people fought over controlling him rather than really they wanted his money because he hadn't done a pre-need guardian, something we completely take care of in the estate planning. So the story I like to tell about taking care of your children and grandchildren, I have a colleague. She is an amazing estate planning attorney in a state far from here, and has given me permission to tell her family story, because her mother is basically a shut-in and a wonderful lady, but has lived her whole life very meekly and separates herself from all society and friends. Well, when her mother was a little girl, she had a sister and was being raised by a single mother many, many years ago on the East Coast. And one night, the mother went out and left the children in the charge of a babysitter. And sadly, the mother never came home. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was foul play or an accident, but the mother was killed that night. And so once the police did their investigation, they figured out that there were these 2 minor children at home with a babysitter. Well, the mother hadn't done any estate planning. The babysitter, the only person they really knew, uh, wasn't allowed to keep them, of course, because that wouldn't be against the law. And the two kids, under the law at the time, were split up and sent to separate foster homes, right? This part of the story does have a good ending in that eventually some more distant relatives were able to come in and the court was able to rule that those two little girls needed to be together and get raised. But you know what? The psychological effect on my colleague's mother has haunted her throughout her whole life. And she's always been worried that somebody's going to come and take her away again because she went through that. That could have all been avoided merely by her mother doing the smallest bit of estate planning, of having a will, of appointing guardians for those girls or trust to take care of them. That would have immediately meant that the right person would have taken care of them. And she would not have lived a very small life and as a shut-in, afraid of what the world had to offer to her next. So, do you ever have that nagging feeling? I do, that something's left undone. I'm always worried about what I don't know. So I don't know what you guys do. I don't know anything about the skills that you've acquired in life, and awesome that you do it. Hope you're making the world a better place. I'm trying to too. I know about this stuff. I know about estate planning. I know about how to take care of your family to protect your children and you and your family tree. So I'm going to shift a little bit off the family subject now. We're doing pretty well on time. I like to respect your time. And just say to you that really in existence in America today, there are two tax codes. There's a tax code for the informed and there's a tax code for the uninformed. Which one do you want to be? Because I promise you, a goal of Rock Solid Law is to make sure that you pay only the mandatory taxes now, throughout your life, and through your estate, and as your wealth descends through the generations, and not pay the voluntary ones. I've yet to meet a person who wanted to pay more to the IRS than is required by law. Maybe there's some out there. So do you know what your biggest expense is? People, when I do this live, and I hope to do that again soon, people will either say their mortgage or food, typically. But you know what the biggest expense is? For almost all of us, except the lowest socioeconomic group. It's taxes. It's taxes. And taxes against inheritance is a place they're going, and I promise you that's going to happen soon. So the sooner we can make planning with your financial advisors through your estate plan, the better we can protect the future of your hard-earned earnings, hard-earned wealth. All right, the sooner we can do it, the better. Something's going to change probably soon. Last year, the stretch went away, and that was under a Republican president and Republican Senate. And I'll be glad to explain that later, but it means your kids are going to pay taxes sooner on the money you leave them, not through an IRA or something like that. All right. There are other ways of doing things that can make your income or your savings tax-free. We'd love to look at your particular situation. We have an amazing analysis that our firm does in that regard. So I believe we're going to see tax on qualified funds going up this term. We have a new administration, and I believe that somehow this government's going to have to pay for all the relief that's come out in the previous administration as a result of COVID, and in this administration very shortly to help people get through COVID, which I support. But we got to pay for it somehow, right? So we can reduce or eliminate taxes. We have many strategies, methods, and tools for doing so. All right. So what we do in our process that's different from other people is look at your family, look at your values, and we tell your story based on those values, right? We also want to, I got one more story, avoid unintentional disinheritance. Happens all the time. So let me tell you this story, and it comes straight from the family of another colleague, one that I currently work with. So a man and a woman married. They had a fantastic marriage, and they had a son who for them was perfect in every way. Until in his later teenage years, he suffered a sports-related traumatic brain injury. So the son was going to be able to function at a lower level throughout his life, but he was never going to be able to function without someone else's assistance. And so the husband and wife set about setting him up to live the best life he could lead with the traumatic brain injury. But sadly, a few years later, the husband died, right? So you got a young adult with a brain injury and mom. So mom, after an appropriate period of mourning, met another gentleman and they fell in love and she married him. And he had a beautiful daughter and she had this one son. And together they formed a new life and they intermingled all of their assets, right? As people do. So they took care of the brain injured boy. And during this period of time, the young woman was so beautiful that she attracted the attention of a rock star, a literal rock star. If I were at liberty to tell you, you would absolutely know his name or definitely the name of his band. They had huge hits some time ago. And she married him and he was unbelievably wealthy. And so they cared for the brain injured child and didn't really need to worry about the daughter. Sadly, they didn't do any estate planning then either. And more sadly, after a few more years, the wife passed away. So all of her assets went to her second husband. Not a bad guy, but he didn't bother to do any estate planning. And not long after that, he passed away. Guess what happened? Guess what happened? His daughter inherited everything. All of the assets from the first marriage and the second marriage went to the daughter who was married to the rock star. None of them went to the brain injured son, right? So a rock star is being a rock star. His attention was caught by a literal supermodel, and he divorced the daughter and married the supermodel. He was actually very generous in the divorce for the daughter. So she became a multimillionaire through her marital dissolution, right? And she inherited all the money from her father, who was married to the mother of the brain injured boy. And the brain injured boy got nothing. They didn't intend for that to happen. They didn't intend for that to happen. But it happened. And he ended up with nothing. So the failure to plan, and I'm here to tell you 80% of Americans have either failed to plan or their plan's so old it's useless. The failure to plan can lead to really bad results and always leads to probate. I'm an anti-probate device, folks. Probate means a diminution in value of the wealth that you leave to your family. It means delay, it means publicity, and it means creditors come out of the woodwork, even fake ones. There's all sorts of good reasons to avoid probate, and we can do that through proper trust planning and funding. All right, so why is that important? Because history shows in America, families go from rags to riches and back to rags in 3 or maybe 4 generations typically, except for the families who plan, right? Hyannisport, the Kennedys, stays in the family. Why? They have incredible long-term planning. So I've been asked in to a national small group of very high-end planners, and they've taken care of former presidents. They've taken care of Nobel Peace Prize winners. So I have the access to some of the best minds in the country. Not a group I paid to join, a group that came and asked me to be their Florida point person. So I can take care of you at whatever level you are. If it's just a mom and pop, man, we got you covered. If it's the most sophisticated plan out there in America, man, we got you covered. So what is it about? It's about keeping all or as much as possible under the law of what you've earned to share with whom or what you want. Passing it, your love, what you have earned, to those you treasure most or what you treasure most. It can be about heirs. It can be about legacy. And I'm telling you, planning is the only way to preserve your legacy, because the stories are legion of what happens among families if there's no planning and who comes with their claws out to take the inheritance. Most of us care about something bigger than ourselves. I've practiced 37 years now, 30 on my own. I've found that most people have an objective bigger than simply our wonderful life. What you care about, treasure, and love is entirely up to you. But if you do care about someone, including yourself, or something like a charity, I can help. Now, that's the presentation I wanted to tell today. And I'm really surprised I was able to tell 3 stories in under 22 minutes. That's probably a world record for this attorney. So if you have any questions, this would be a great time to put them in the chat bar. Those of you who signed up, we will honor the offer that we made to give you the $1,000 discount from your estate plan. We would love for you to come in and see us. And as I pointed out in this presentation, the sooner the better. So we will help you preserve your assets for those you love, for those you treasure, and to pass them on to future generations. And we will help you be cared for during your life. I'm not seeing any hands raised or any questions in the chat bar, which is somewhere about right there to click. So not seeing any, we'll queue up Lionel Richie and the Commodores. And I will end this session and look forward to seeing everybody again next week, Thursday at 9. I'm John Miller, Rock Solid Law, ready to help you with your estate plan, with your real estate sale, or with your small business. Thanks for joining us.